what we've been doing in the first session, we really looked at my world, right? What I see using hypnosis and talking directly to parts and to MS. In the second session, what we did was kind of look at the main traits I keep seeing over and over again. And what we're going to do today is understand where these traits might have gotten formed. We're going to actually use childhood development theory so that we can understand these traits. Not only the personality traits, but even some of the physical traits of MS. A lot of people think about childhood development theories and they think about, it's like the stages where you're supposed to start to grasp, or you're supposed to begin walking, right? Or you're supposed to begin talking. But childhood development theory also includes psychological milestones. In developmental theory, they talk about certain milestones or challenges we experience at different stages of childhood, especially. Those are the key ones that we're going to look at. We experience a challenge, we learn from it, we mature from it, we develop through it, and then we go on to the next milestones. If we complete a milestone successfully, it helps us with the following milestones. However, if they aren't completed successfully, we continue to develop to the next childhood milestone, but those incomplete milestones affect how we continue. So it's like we're compensating, right? I keep thinking about, for example, math. As if the kid hasn't figured out addition and class is already starting to do multiplications, right? It's like dragging these doubts that you continue to have, right? Well, the same thing happens psychologically. There's a lot of different schools. And what I found was that the clearest explanation about this link between milestones, personality, and even physical body is from Wilhelm Reich. He wrote a book between World War I and World War II. Now, his book is impossible to read, but fortunately, the students of his students have continued this work. And in 2015, there was a guy named Stephen Kessler who wrote a very simple book in very simple language called The 5 Personality Patterns. And we're going to use his book and how he explains these milestones to understand where those MS personality traits come from. So these are the stages he talks about. He says before we are born and until around 6 months, this is the stage in which we figure out, is the world safe enough for me to be in it? And so it's the time where the spirit embodies the body. But of course, you need to know that you're safe enough to do this, right? So then you start participating in the world. The next milestone we experience is all about needs. Now think about a baby. When a child is very, very, very young, 6 months old, even 3 months old, what does a child do when they need something? They cry. And what is mom's responsibility? Figure out what needs to be met, right? Is the baby hungry? Is the baby tired? Does the baby have a stomach ache? What's happening? And so the next milestone is about asking for your needs and having your world fulfill those needs. When a child is fed, when the child is full, what does the child do? I'm done, I'm satisfied, right? After that stage or that milestone of learning to get what you need, the next milestone is, it's kind of, here in the United States, we talk about the terrible twos, right? The next milestone is all about the kid, a child kind of wanting to do things by themselves, right? It's like, me, I want to eat the food. I want to feed myself, or I want to try to tie my own shoe, or I want to put on my own shirt, right? And it's about starting to feel safe enough to try things, to do it themselves. Once that milestone is achieved, if you think about it, as the child gets older, of course, the child is able to get into more things. And so what happens is parents need to allow some freedom. They can't be all helicopter parents, yet with some limitations. Because yes, you want the child to learn to play by herself, but you don't want the child to play in the street, right? So there's freedom with limitations. So the child learns, I am free to do what I want to be doing, and I have something beyond myself, something greater than me, others that I can trust to keep me safe. Once that milestone is achieved, and this is about the age of 4 years old, I remember I was listening to this NPR, this radio program, and a guy was interviewing a preschool teacher, and they were talking about kids and how kids are at this age, 4 or 5 years old. And the preschool teacher was saying, at this age, kids are all about rules. The teacher was explaining that in preschool, if you have an hour to play, the kids will dedicate 50 minutes to arguing about what are the rules of the game. You're doing it wrong. No, you're supposed to ask first. No, you have to share. No, da, 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 da. It's all about the rules. And the following milestone that happens is once a child understands their needs, once a child figures out how to do things themselves within a limitation and figures out there are certain rules I need to follow, that child starts to have a lot of tools, right? They can do a lot of things now. I can tie my shoe, I can eat, put on my shirt, I can go play, or I can, look at a book quietly. The child begins to learn, what do I want to do, right? And begins to trust. I know mom said, let's take a bath, but I prefer, right, to play. And so a child starts learning to trust what they want and to self-reference. That first piece where a child learns that it's safe to be in the world, if the child is born into someone living on the street, or someone who's really not even sure they want to have a child, right? So there's a danger that even in womb, that's not safe to be here. The child will learn to leave, literally or psychologically leave. I don't know if you have any experience of any friends that under pressure, they disappear, or you're like, hey, let's deal with this. They're not about fixing it and figuring it out. They're just like deer in headlights, and they just leave or get distracted, or there they are in this little corner. And you're like, what are you doing over there? We were going to go do this other thing, right? That's the first obstacle to meeting this milestone and how the child copes with it. Now, the next milestone, and this one's a big milestone. If the child, when the child asks for his needs, cries, and for any reason, the parents, especially the mother, can't meet those needs, the child learns, maybe my needs are not as that important. The child also learns, if I meet your needs, if I take care of you, then you will be in a better position and take care of me. Right? And so the child learns not to be focused on here, on himself and herself. The child learns to be focused on the other. And so Stephen calls this the merging, because it's about focusing on the other person. Now, what Stephen says is that we're usually not just focused on one. We usually have picked up several. The next one, if a child is too constricted, mom and dad won't let them do anything, then what happens is these kids just kind of hunker down, kind of waiting for everyone to leave so I can do what I want to do. And so they learn just to kind of restrict their energy and close up. And you'll see these people, they're pretty quiet. They don't speak very much. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes you'll see a couple in which she's like, she just talks nonstop and da da da. And he's just like the quiet, solid, looks like a trunk, right? That's this enduring pattern. Then remember about the limitations, right? We're supposed to learn to do things ourselves, and parents give us some limitations, but within a space, right? We need to have some freedom. If for any reason there isn't this limitation, for example, the child gets hurt, the child can decide, I can't trust you to keep me safe. And so then the child decides, I have to keep myself safe. And so the strategy here is, I have to be prepared to fight any moment because it's all on me. And so what happens here is there's a lot of energy. I have to be big, right? I'm a little kid, but I have to be big to, to defend myself. And I have to be aggressive. And finally, after this time that kids, learn what all the rules are, if the kid does not feel safe, or if in their family of origin, it's all about doing things the right way, the child doesn't learn to do the things my own way, doesn't learn to trust her inner wisdom, her inner desires. And so in order to keep the peace, in order to keep from upsetting anyone, the child is really good at doing things right and appropriately. And so one of the great ways to make sure you're doing things right is having like an inner parent inside that's constantly watching, going, you're not doing good, you got to do better, that's not perfect, careful there. Really making sure, like those 4 or 5-year-old kids playing, that making sure you're doing it by the rules, right? You're doing it correctly. Now, we all experience bits and pieces of this, but there's two things. The things that we experience, or the areas where we experience most challenges, the areas where we experience trauma, and the areas that we're just really good at, these are the areas that we will create this persona, these coping mechanisms. So let's focus on two of them. The merging pattern, the not get all your needs met, and the rigid pattern, needing to do things right and fearing doing things because you want to do them. Okay. I want to show you, if you guys remember last week, the traits we looked at, I want to show you the traits in the rigid pattern and then the traits in the merging pattern that are very similar to what we looked at last week. So let's get into details about how these show up. I want to start with the rigid personality because this is where some of the big things really show up in the MS traits. One is always seeking approval, look good, to perform well. Love is kind of like, if I do something for you, then you will love me, right? So it's kind of like a conditioned love rather than an unconditioned love. I just love you because, it's like a puppy, right? It's like, well, you can do whatever, you still love them, right? With the rigid personality, there's the belief that work is valuable, that play is not. It's like play when work is done, but work is never done. There's always something more to do. In the rigid personality, there's a lot of guilt and shame. There's the need for perfection, right? It's always looking for, how can I do it better? How can I do it perfect? And what's interesting is with the rigid personality, as with MS, there's a need to stay very busy. With rigid personality, the need to be busy is in order not to feel. It's a way of coping with stress. Actions are valuable, emotions are not. So one of my clients would tell me that her mom was actually not very emotional. She was very reserved. And so her mom didn't deal very well with feelings, right? And so she learned, hold my feelings in, because if I'm upset, mom doesn't deal with that very well. She's like, oh, it's okay. That's it. Why make such a big deal about it, right? So holding those emotions in, holding what you want in, right? A lot of that rigidity of the body. I hold things in. I keep myself under control. Choosing, remember the decision making, choosing not from what you want or enjoy, but from what is right and appropriate. This need to control and to plan things months in advance. And then some of the quotes that people with the rigid personality live by is, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, right? Or it has to be hard to be good. And there's a lot of shoulding. I hear I should have done this. I should have eaten better. I should want to exercise every day. I should want to. There's a lot of shoulding, right? Because it's about rules. And as we said, there's a very harsh inner critic. There's this inner parent that's constantly vigilant to make sure you're doing everything right. And then a need for, I could be better than what I am, right? I could be, I'm not enough yet, but if I try hard enough, then maybe I will reach that. That's the rigid personality. When we look at the merger, that second one about not meeting needs, Kessler actually explains there's like two strategies that happen. If you don't get your needs met, you can either become very helpless, and you might see friends that when they're very stressed and things aren't going well, they just like totally fall back and just are waiting for, someone to come save them. And the second strategy is, my needs are not being met, therefore I'm not going to depend on you for them. I'll meet my own needs, or I just won't have needs, so then I don't have to be hurt by them. So with the compensated merger personality, with those strategies that we develop because we don't get all our needs met, and we don't get all our needs met often enough that we have to find a strategy. So for example, if your mother is grieving because your grandfather died right before you were born, she might not be able to focus on you always, right? She might, or if your parents are separating or other problems, your mom might not be able to be there. Or for example, a client who's, or client, myself, or maybe mom is hospitalized, right? And so again, I'm not getting those basic needs met. So what does this child experience? Always not feeling enough. Thus, I keep taking on and taking on more responsibilities than I can really deal with. There's always this, same as the rigid, need for validation. However, and this is experience with the merger, is I'm always looking for validation. So I try really hard, and then I get validation from you, from my boss, from my mom. But the satisfaction of it is very temporary. And then again, I need it again, right? I feel that I need validation again. It's not long lasting. In this case, again, there's a busyness. So we got it stacked. And one in rigid, it's about just not dealing with stress. I'm just going to be really busy. In this case, the busyness is a way to avoid feeling that void, that inner void. It's like trying to feel full. Remember, we talked in this one, it's like the child, once the child is fed, feels full, satisfied, doesn't want anymore. But if the child never gets or doesn't get enough times that feeling of full, the child feels empty. And so this busyness, just like someone else might use food, is a way to try to fill and not feel, right, that void. Since your needs are not being met, you withdraw and you maybe not ask for anything, right? I can take care of myself. It's safer that way. I don't get rejected. And then there's the experience of guilt, right? Guilt if I bring attention to my needs. I don't want to tell my family I have MS because I feel guilty if they worry about me, because I don't want them to deal with that, to have to worry about that, right? Interesting enough, the rigid personality tends to also be very rigid with boundaries. Stephen, I tried to get him to help, to work with me in this. I wanted to, him to work with me to do these presentations. And he's like, nope. I mean, that was it. Rigid personality is really good with boundaries. But if you also have challenges in this stage, it's really hard for you to say no, because it's about your environment needs to be happy. It's scary to say no. It seems threatening. And because at such a young age, you're focused on the other person, you develop a sensitivity and empathy, right? You can really read if someone upset, because it's important for you to be there for the other person. So you totally ignore, deny your needs. And majority of my clients have actually confessed, I don't even know what I need. I don't know what I want, what my own needs are. Now, when I reviewed these with Stephen Kessler, and I told him, look, it seems that my clients with MS, they seem to have they definitely have the traits of these two patterns, of these two stages, but there's a few other pieces that is like cranked up. I said, it's like there's something more. And these are the areas that I told him about. I told him, yes, there's definitely the inner critic of the merger, but my clients with MS do not focus. They might see it, but they're careful not to correct other people. That focus of perfection and judgment is on themselves. The high standards is about their own work. Additionally, not only do you have this very harsh inner critic, it even comes with a self-loathing. You don't like yourself. And another piece I shared with him is I said, the rigid, it's about doing it right, doing it perfect. And I said, but with MS, what I notice is there's a lot more about, I'm going to do it the way I think others expect of me. I think this is what they want from me. What I experience of my clients with MS is they're actually a lot more sensitive. They're very creative. Several of my clients have said they see life in color. One of my clients would come to the session and be like, what a peachy day today. I can't describe it any other way. It's just peach today. And I was like, that is not logical thinking. So for me, it's like client diagnosed with MS is like being a very highly creative and sensitive being in a very rational, logical world, which makes sense with my clients being artists and musicians and poets, and then deciding they have to be lawyers and engineers, right? They have to do something rational. The other thing I notice with MS that isn't in the book of Stephen is, yes, with the merger, you want to meet someone else's needs, but that full, almost like head over heels, that full, like, if I see you suffering, or if I think you're struggling, I will forget to eat and sleep for 3 days just to help you. I didn't see that in his book, right? I saw, yes, meeting other people's needs, but that I am responsible for your happiness seemed to be beyond what I saw in his book. And lastly, though the rigid personality sometimes can feel that I am better than others because I'm doing it right, I don't see that so much in MS. What I see is almost like before the first symptoms, some of my clients would talk about always believing they were superhuman, like they could run around, other people. They were invincible. They could totally ignore their bodies. They could work 16 hours and no one else at work could do that, right? There's this, this invincibility until MS comes in. When I explained this to Stephen, he said, oh, it looks like your clients are parentified children. And I said, eh? In parentified children, as a child, you take on roles and responsibilities that are more appropriate to an adult or a parent. If your mom has a nervous breakdown and you feel you have to protect her, or if mom was sick with a chronic disease, and so everyone in the house has to be careful around mom because we don't want to upset her because her, symptoms can get worse, then the child takes on, taking care of traits, right? Roles. Or if mom is upset because dad, drank too much yesterday, or dad is having an affair, and mom talks to her child like she's an adult and tells her all these adult emotional issues, and the child feels like they have to comfort mom or protect mom in some way. I'll give you a few other examples and then we'll look at these characteristics that you see right here. If mom is grieving, right, then the child feels that they have to make mom happy, right? Make mom not feel so bad. Also common is if the family is constantly stressed about money. One of my clients would say, she told me that her dad would be, at the kitchen table doing numbers, crunching numbers, right? And was uber stressed. And she would sit next to him at 5 years old, right? And she would, tell him, it's okay, daddy, I don't need my books, or I could wear this for years, daddy. She was stressed and wanting to help care for the finances of her family. And this has been, I've heard this several times. And then the child makes an internal decision. I'm going to be really good in school, so then I will be really good in college and I'll get a really good job that'll pay a lot of money, and then I can save my family from this pain. If you look at the parentified child, you can see all, the rigid and the mergers, kind of everything gets cranked up, right? My self-worth is tied to my actions and my achievements. And so then that caregiving we talked about in the first trait, it's like, I don't have needs, I'm independent. But when someone else needs, I feel someone else needs, it's like compulsory. It's like, I can't help it. I have to be there. I have to help. Excessive self-sacrifice. You would always say, why do my clients, it's like, yes, do a lot in work, but it's like, it's so much. It can be so much. Again, here it is, right? Own needs feel like a burden, a lot of self-criticism and judgment, likes to feel in control. And what shows up with parentified child, not so much with merger and rigid, probably have some, is anxiety. An unrelenting worry. Remember, these are like little adults walking around, right? You don't have the tools, but you're doing your best. So there's always like, I haven't done enough. I haven't done, something's going to happen. I'm not going to, figure this out. What's interesting is one of my clients asked me, why me, right? There was 3 kids in the family. Why am I the parentified child? Why am I doing the caretaking? And when I was reading research on the parentified child, what it talked about is, in a family, the child that is most sensitive, most empathetic, and interesting enough, most gifted, tends to be the one who most likely takes this role, taking care of the adults. And one of the last research I read about the parentified child was there's a higher chance of chronic physical illness. But think about it. There's a lot of self-sacrifice. There's a lot of pushing. There's a lot of inner critic. There's, a lot of not loving yourself and not feeling enough, and a lot of anxiety. And all of that can show up in the physical body. So when we think about the formation of MS, we think about there's an energy that's held in. It's like, I can't think about, what do I want? I have to hold my stuff in, and also focused out there. I need to read you. I need to be sensitive to what your needs are. And thus, there isn't a strong core, and there isn't a balance. And there's a lot of tension. And so it's kind of a mix between the merging pattern, I'm here to meet your needs, or to be very independent, focus on you. The rigid pattern, I'm focused on doing it right, I'm focusing on success. And the parentified pattern, I am a little adult. So how did your childhood influence these tendencies? One of the things that also, when you look at this, is sometimes the pattern begins earlier. So it's like maybe your needs weren't met right when you were born for, the first few months kind of thing. Sometimes the pattern gets created much later, when there's some very significant incident or difficulty, maybe even in your teen years, you can develop this pattern, develop one of these patterns. It doesn't necessarily, I'm saved because by 18 months, everything was good. It can happen later. Again, these are like strategies to deal with overwhelm.